Hi everybody, welcome to another edition of In a Heartbeat. I'm your host John Clor. You know, if you've watched this show, you know it's all about your health and well-being, and when you see me, somehow or another talk always seems to center around cars. Well today, the reason I'm thinking you've got a great show to watch is because we got a lot of choices in our car buying world today about green and economically friendly alternatives to better fuel economy and new technologies that are eco-friendly to the earth. And never before is it more important than to have the right information before you make those kind of decisions. So to talk about some of the new technologies, we actually had the new Chevy Volt come out here to the War Memorial, and we did a great walk around and a talk about that technology. Today we're going to talk about an older technology that people around the Grosse Pointe seem to really love. There's a cult following for the world of diesels. And who better to talk about diesels than our old friend Chris Sawyer from the virtualdriver.com. So I think I'm going to have Chris pull in and talk to us a little bit about this all-new technology. In fact, where is Chris? I hope he's coming along soon. Well, here he is now, Chris Sawyer. Hey, Chris. Hey, how you been?
Hey, John, how are you?
Nice to see you again, Chris.
Been a while.
What do you got here?
It's a Volkswagen Toureg TDI.
Wow, brand new out of the press fleet?
You got it.
Checking it out for the virtualdriver.com, I suppose. Well, listen, before we get into this fantastic new diesel, let's talk a little bit about diesel technology. You know, people think they know a lot about diesels, but it's a whole different beast when it comes to powertrains. Isn't that right?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Let's go back, kind of invented really around the turn of the century. I mean,
which century?
So the Germans actually, was it part of the Daimler deal? Or what?
Well, it was Rudolf Diesel.
Okay.
And it was really in competition with the gasoline engine, which was Nicholas Otto. Those darn Germans giving us everything.
I know.
And the whole idea was that this was an engine that could do a lot of work and would be fuel efficient for the most part, but also low in emissions, especially in CO2, because it was used for engines in mines.
Right.
Because when they're not under a lot of load, there's hardly any CO2 that comes out of a diesel.
Right.
And so you can use it in those areas. And it was great for boats because you didn't have to worry about fuel vapor because it didn't collect in the bottom of the boat and explode.
Which is a
Which
good
can
thing.
really ruin your trip.
It can ruin your day.
Oh, absolutely.
But, so diesels came out really to do work.
Right.
And then,
the work
and then
engine.
at the same time, in parallel, we're building gasoline-powered engines, and gasoline-powered engines seem to really take off, especially when people would go to their pharmacy to get gasoline in. You know, and
absolutely.
There were no gas stations.
No, absolutely not.
So they were really in tandem. They were kind of like what we're seeing today with you know, electric and hybrid technology trying to outrace the gasoline-powered engine technology, and it's who's going to finish first, right?
Right, absolutely.
So why did diesel then finish a distant second, at least in cars? I know we can talk a little bit.
Because they were smelly and noisy. And the reason they were smelly and noisy is because there was a lot of sulfur in the diesel fuel.
Okay.
And noisy because it's a compression ignition engine. You compress the air in the cylinder, and the air gets hot. You inject the fuel, and that's what lights it off. There's no spark plug.
Right, so that's a real fundamental difference, folks, between like the diesel engine and the gasoline engine that you're used to. You know, this is a spark plug, we have that spark. You know, where the old saying, you know, why is my car running? It's either spark or fuel. Mm-hmm. Well, in the diesel, there is no spark. The heat is generated by compressing it to a very high temperature. And that's really kind of the major difference between a gasoline engine and a diesel engine, except for, of course, really the fuel.
Right.
The fuel itself is pretty much very different.
Oh, absolutely. Diesel is a rather interesting petroleum distillate because it's a direct distillate. You distill the petroleum and you get diesel. To get gasoline, you have to distill the petroleum and then crack it.
Wow. So there's a lot more oil in diesel fuel.
Very much so. And an average barrel, about 24% of it is diesel directly.
Wow.
And the rest is used for other things, including gasoline and all the other
So that ignition in a diesel engine has a little bit more oil in that fuel. So that changes.
There's
kind
more
of
power.
more power. You know, there's more oil per stroke of that engine. So the engines are significantly different. But folks, there's a real change in the way they build the engines because of that higher compression. Doesn't the diesel engine have to be either heavier or stronger?
Well, yes and no. That's changing. It used to be that because they would run 22-to-1 compression ratio,
Right.
which is way above what you do in a gas engine, you would have to have a really heavy cast iron block,
Right.
or compacted graphite. Now the compression ratios come down an awful lot because the high compression ratio creates a lot of nitrous oxide emissions.
Okay.
So they've lowered it to about 16, 17 to 1, maybe times a little lower than that.
Wow.
And so you're down to engines that are either cast iron or even aluminum.
In a diesel engine?
Oh, absolutely. Audi won the Le Mans 24 Hours a number of times with an aluminum diesel.
Racing the engine.
Yeah.
You know, folks, you think about when your folks may first had diesel, and they're usually in a German sedan, and you remember a couple of things. I know they were smelly,
Oh, yeah.
and they made a clackety, clackety, clackety noise that was discernible from many steps away. So if you had a diesel, you could either see them smoke on takeoff or that clack. What was that clackety, clackety noise?
That's the compression ignition.
So you're actually hearing the...
Right, and that's changed now that we have direct injected, electronically controlled ignition.
Right. Yeah.
And all of that's changed everything fundamentally. These things are so quiet, you can't really tell you're in a diesel.
So the two big knocks against diesel back in the
No
day,
pun intended.
I don't want, yeah, sorry, big knocks against diesel were all that noise and the little smelly fuel, the
The
fuel,
sulfur. Oh,
It was
yeah.
the sulfur, plus the fuel had a very oily smell.
Oh,
And
yeah.
So when you went to refuel, and then diesel wasn't as readily available in certain gas stations, you had to...
Usually not, because we didn't have a higher percentage of diesels in this market. Usually it was for heavy trucks,
Yeah,
and so we didn't use it for passenger use.
And folks, just like it is pretty much of the trends in the industry, the diesels, you call them the smile states when you think of California, New York, and all the states along the coastal seaboards. Those were the states that kind of tried out all the new, and I know out east they love their diesels.
Oh, absolutely.
And the German
They
Mercedes,
last forever.
yeah, and they love to drive them up in Connecticut and New York, and that's why you'd see in the Midwest, especially here in Detroit, the more affluent societies did try the diesels because they're used to their parents and grandparents visiting them out east or out west. So Grosse Pointe had a real cult following with diesel, but that was because they were high-end cars.
Oh, yeah.
And they liked the fact that they were doing something different with a different fuel efficiency. Weren't they more fuel efficient even back then, Chris?
Oh, yeah. It's about 30% more fuel efficient than gasoline.
So you're talking 30% even back in the day, the 60s and 70s.
Yeah. When they were uncontrolled, there was no pollution controls of any sort. You maybe got 45% more fuel efficiency out of a diesel.
Wow.
But those are also non-turbocharged engines.
Right.
Now they're turbo diesels. They're a lot faster. Those old ones were like, you drove them in Kansas, you drove them in Florida, you went up a hill, no.
That's right. So you can see now that the entire diesel world has kind of changed. Why don't we give a little heads up on why diesels are so prevalent in big semi-tractor trailer trucks and not so much
Torque.
gasoline?
Torque, absolute torque.
So why do these engines and these kinds of vehicles make more torque?
Because it's I could get really technical, but I won't. The fuel itself, because it's compression ignited, is very dense.
Okay.
And so you're getting an awful lot more of a punch out of it.
More of a push down.
Oh yeah, very much so. And you get more of that push over longer stroke. And so you get a lot more torque that way.
Yeah, you know, we should really point out here that when you feel power in your car, when you
It's
step on the
torque.
gas,
You drive
it's
on
not
torque.
It's
No.
not horsepower. What you feel when you step on the gas is not horsepower. You're feeling torque, which is the twisting motion that your engine can do. It actually like moves you forward and lurches you forward. That feeling is torque.
So
from
it
the
gets you
engine.
across the intersection.
Right.
Torque.
And the lower the RPM that the torque takes place, the more satisfying the acceleration is. So the reason we have it in trucks, mostly in semi-truck, because they are hauling heavy loads.
Oh, tons.
They need to take off in a hurry with that heavy load, so they need that twisting power.
Hurry being a relative term with a truck, yes.
If you've been on the on ramp behind a semi, I don't think fast is,
No.
is part of that
No, but
equation.
you think you're pulling, what, 200,000 pounds?
Yeah, in a 110-inch.
Yeah.
So you can see why they need the torque of a
They
diesel
need
engine.
it, absolutely.
Now the other compromise, Chris, is cost of diesel fuel versus gasoline.
Right, and That's something of a misnomer because it's actually cheaper to produce the diesel fuel than it is to produce the gasoline.
It's cheaper to produce it, but at the pump, it's like
more
a
expensive.
dime or so, or 15 cents more.
Oh yeah, and part of the reason is because, well, truckers don't vote in that area, so they keep, raising the cost.
They're driving through.
Absolutely. But the other part is that because we're not using the barrel of fuel the way it should be used as to what's naturally coming out of it, we're cracking more of the distillates and turning it into gasoline and diesel, then it is more expensive to create diesels, and there are fewer diesel-specific refineries in the U.S.
I see, okay.
Now, we haven't put any refineries up in this country for 31 years, so we've created a problem for ourselves.
I should say so. We had recent news here in Detroit of the Marathon Oil Company down on I-75 expanding their cracking facility, their refinery, and we don't really see that very often. And part of the other issue is that when you go to a gas station, some gas stations don't offer diesel because they don't have any semi-traffic in and out of their station.
And there's not been enough diesel passenger vehicles for them to really say, I'm going to take the plunge and do it.
Right. But today, folks, that's really changing. In fact, now we have more choices as far as diesel vehicle goes than at probably any other time in recent memory.
Ever.
All right.
Ever.
So I mean, it's not just cars either. Now we're talking about cars, trucks, and now even SUVs. But what's the advantage of, say, having a diesel in your SUV or your truck as opposed to your regular sedan passenger car?
Towing capacity, for one thing.
Okay.
And, and not just boats and things like that, but the kids and all their stuff. And I mean, here's this vehicle right here is a very stoutly built vehicle. It's about 5,000 pounds.
Wow.
Oh yeah, it's heavy. But you can drive it through the Sahara and not worry about coming out the other side.
That's right.
The fact of the matter is, I came from Farmington Hills to here, and I averaged 33 miles a gallon.
In a 5,000 pound
In a 5,000 pound SUV with full luxury interior and all the rest. I mean, that's living large.
And so when you say take something like this out to the lake and you've got maybe a couple of jet skis, you got your whole family in here, that ability to pull all that without you're not really straining the diesel engine.
No, not at all. This thing's got 225 horsepower, but 406 foot-pounds of torque, almost off idle.
That's really, I mean, when you think about, folks, the horsepower to torque ratio, generally on an engine that's really a gasoline engine that's really working pretty well, the horsepower and the torque number is pretty similar. But when you say you have 200 and...
It's almost 2 to 1.
It's almost 2 to 1. You'll have double the torque, double that pulling and twisting power on a diesel than you would...
And since that's what gets you going,
right,
you're going that much faster to begin with, and then the horsepower takes over, and you really don't need a lot of horsepower to move a vehicle along. It's the torque that gets it going. So you're using the engine to work at the low end, and then it's coasting, it's loafing from that point on.
So you're saying that the torque is going to get that moving from a
dead
dead stop,
rush,
and then you use the horsepower to just keep that momentum going. And that's where the fuel economy comes in.
Absolutely.
So the diesel really doesn't have to work.
No, not at all.
It's just spinning and making some sweet sounds for you.
When I got this car, I mean, it's got a 20-gallon tank in it.
Okay.
And they delivered it, and it said, fuel range was 750 miles. And I'm sitting there going, well, okay, I could drive to Virginia. And it's not even moved off the peg yet.
Folks, take a look at your current vehicle, and if you've got an information readout and you fill it up, it'll tell you how many miles to empty. In most cars, that's going to be between 300 and 400 miles somewhere. But when you filled up on this thing, it says you can go over 700 miles on a tank of gas. You will be making some stops, but it's not for gasoline or diesel fuel. Yeah,
pit stops. Yeah,
that gives you a couple of ideas on how there's a significant difference between a diesel vehicle and a gasoline vehicle. So something like this, really, Chris, when we talk about your lifestyle, it's a lifestyle vehicle.
Right, and there are downsides to diesels that have come through the years. One is particulates, and because of the way the fuel is burned, and the capacity of the fuel, how thick it is, that you do get some particulates. But now there are particulate filters on the vehicles. And you also have the selective catalyst reduction system, which it reduces the particulates, but also uses urea to inject it into the exhaust system. That turns the nitrous oxides into ammonia, and then the ammonia goes through a catalyst, and that turns it into nitrogen and steam.
Wow.
And you've got a tank in the back of this vehicle that has the urea fill in it, and it's got, I think, 30% urea, and the rest is deionized water. And you buy that at the dealer, and there's enough in there that it should last you between oil changes. And since VW gives you full service, it takes care of it.
So that's another aspect of the diesel when you think about, when I go in for my oil change, you don't get that urea change in your gasoline engine. It's
No.
not part of the. But it is also how that these vehicles now can meet our very stringent emission standards.
And the EPA does not like diesels.
No, they never have.
Well,
Well, part of it was our fault with our fuels. What was the holdup on getting what did they change about diesel fuel?
They refined them more, and
Okay.
they got the sulfur out of them.
Sulfur came out.
And when you took the sulfur out of it, you also took a lot of the particulates out of it.
Okay.
And those are the particulates that were fouling the injection systems.
Okay.
You couldn't run this engine on the old fuel because it uses very precise piezoelectric injectors on it. It's a common rail system, and it puts fuel through that rail at 30,000 psi.
Wow, that's under a lot of pressure.
And the holes in that injector are the size of a human hair.
Oh,
and there
my
are
goodness.
multiple holes in there, and it opens them and as it sees fit. So it's not using all the holes all the time.
Right. Well, you're gonna have to have some really clean fuel.
Oh, absolutely.
You can't have.
You better.
But you know that's the great thing about when we talk about how these vehicles have really cleaned up. You don't have the big smelly exhaust, no more clackety clack. And on this thing, why don't you take us through this thing? So what do we? We've got it's basically, is it an all-wheel drive SUV?
All-wheel drive.
It's all-wheel drive, so it's a 5,000-pound SUV. But you've got is it 5-passenger seating capacity?
Oh yeah.
Okay, so we got
Room for 5.
We got 3 across the back.
Yep.
Okay, and then 2 in the front with
2 across the front, and
with a
however many you
console,
throw in the back for
and a pretty good load area. You got yourself your luggage rack, which is going to be good stuff. You got some serious wheel and tire on this car. That is, probably just
19-inch wheels. Yeah.
19-inch wheels and tires. That's for a race car maybe. And then cubic inches. What are we talking here? Is
It's a 3-liter.
It's a 3-liter engine.
Yeah, so it's 183 cubic inches.
A 3-liter engine pulling this kind of a vehicle around. Why don't you? Can we take a look under the hood?
Absolutely.
All right. Why don't you? Let's go take a look under the hood, folks, and see what we're looking at when we talk about a diesel.
Want to look under the hood?
Yeah, let's look under the hood. Let's take a look at this.
If I can find there. Oh, there we go.
Wow, that thing looks a lot larger than I thought.
Yeah. Well, a lot of that's the Shroud of Stuttgart.
Okay. First thing you notice when you take a look at this engine versus a gasoline engine is we've got it's a turbo diesel. So you've got it goes
Turbo ducting to the intercooler.
Into the intercooler. Now the intercooler adds a whole other layer of.
Yeah, this is on a gasoline turbocharged motor. It keeps the charge dense because it heats up when you compress it. So you want to get it cooled again so you can get more power out of it. And the more air you can get into it, because basically engines are air pumps.
Yep.
And so the more air you can get into it, the more power you get out of it. The more power you get out of it, well, the better you are.
Yeah. And if we always talk about turbocharging, turbocharging really works better in the cooler air, because in the cooler air, the charge is denser. In the hotter air, it kind of.
And with a diesel, it's especially true, but it's less sensitive than a gasoline engine because a diesel engine, a diesel fuel itself does not vapor like a gasoline does. You don't get vapor lock. You can never get vapor lock off of a diesel.
That's a good point.
So you can compress it harder, you can work it harder, and that's really what you're doing. You're getting a lot more bang for the buck out of the fuel. And
but we're not getting any ethanol in this fuel.
No.
So it's not that.
So it's not getting cut. It's not getting cut.
It's not 10 to 15.
And the thing about it is too that people say, well, yeah, but diesel is inherently dirty. If you really wanted to, you can make diesel out of natural gas and a gas to liquid process. You can do the same thing with gasoline. And it's so clean that you can almost get rid of the particulate filter on these cars.
So you're saying that it's just not limited to just that fuel?
No, these things have been around for more than 100 years for a reason, and that they'll be around for another 100 more.
All right, well then if that's the case, and VW has this, we're seeing all the manufacturers, you're telling me now we're going to start seeing diesels, not this displacement, but diesels like this in small, what would we call a basic.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the Chevy's going to introduce the Cruise diesel.
A Chevy Cruise.
Already hearing rumors of 55 miles a gallon.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, so we're talking, somewhere between 1 and 2 liter diesel.
And this is not in a hybrid.
No, not at all.
This is not. You don't need 2 powertrains.
No.
You don't need rare metal technologies.
Nope. You don't. And it's good you put that up, because people talk about how dirty diesel is and all of that. But when you look all the way down the pipeline from well to wheel, these are not that dirty at all. The particulates, yes, they're a little high. The CO2 is much lower. But even the best study that I've seen says, okay, 170 people will die over 70 years if we increase the number of diesels. But how many will benefit from the fact that you now have diesels and you're not having to go to war for foreign oil, and you don't have to, well, you can go faster to where you're going, let's face it.
Well, it's
and
all
all the
about
other things that you can do
time
with
is
it.
money, Chris.
Prosperity that comes from
Yeah,
this.
that's true.
But
Now, when I look at this, would this engine differ significantly from the gas version in as far as weight or in construction? Aren't diesels more money to build?
they are.
Okay.
They are.
So
but
it's not just the
but
intercooler.
only right now. You're already seeing the new technologies coming, things like EcoBoost, the turbocharged direct injected gasoline engine. It's not as stoutly built as a diesel that runs a higher compression ratio,
Well,
but it's not that much less. And so the delta between the two is getting much closer.
Okay.
So while gasoline prices are where they are and the differential is between regular and diesel,
Okay.
you're going to be getting more out of an EcoBoost faster. But if you lease a car, no, you don't want to buy a diesel.
That's important, folks.
You want it for more than 3 years. And if you go from, let's say you go from 3 to 6 years, this thing's going to pay for itself easily.
That's
pay
an
for
important fact. I think we should, bring that to the forefront here. It's the payoff is a little bit down the road. Yeah, it's more expensive to manufacture and build. It's also a little bit more expensive to maintain. That really brings me up. Let's take a look at this injector system that's out back
The
there.
urea.
Yeah, let's go take a look at that too.
All right.
Okay,
So let me show you.
Yeah, let's take a look at this. This is really interesting to me. Of course, it's a power lift gate,
What, did you expect anything else?
not from the Germans.
Oh, of course not. Then we open this
Okay.
up. They give us this nice handy dandy hook.
Now,
And this little tank that's underneath and it actually lives within.
very colorful spare, I must say.
Looks like it comes off a Formula 3 car.
Yeah, it sure does.
It sits within the spare, and that holds the urea.
So the inside of the spare cavity is this urea tank. And so when you get your oil changed,
They refill the tank for you.
So each time you get your service done, this has to be refilled. This is a step doesn't exist in a gasoline powered
No,
car.
absolutely not. And if it runs out, lights will come on the dashboard. And the EPA, of course, doesn't want you driving without
No.
the urea because the emissions go up a bit higher. Not terribly, but they go up higher. So they'll give you 20 starts.
Oh, so you're saying?
So on the 19th start, either leave your car running or get some more of this stuff.
Oh no. Well, there's something, folks. All right, so let's say you're not real good on car maintenance. You get your oil changed. You say, no, I'm not going to get that tank refilled. I'm just going to go for a while. You can't just drive in giving the more polluted
The higher
exhaust,
pollution
the higher pollution in the exhaust, because the car will eventually say, hey,
They'll say,
get-
Achtung, you will not do this.
You will stop.
Absolutely.
And it will not start after that?
After 20 starts, no, yeah.
Oh my goodness. So there is a little bit of ownership difference between a gasoline car. I mean, I know people that have got a gasoline car that don't change the oil. And they just, it doesn't
luck
stop
with
until
that.
it doesn't stop until the red light comes on and it says, I think I had a catastrophic failure somewhere. But so okay, this is a totally different, but
It's part of the cost of maintenance. It's part of the cost of owning the car, but it's not prohibitive by any stretch of the imagination.
But this was not part of diesel ownership just 10 years ago.
No, right.
So what did we have in place? We didn't have this.
Well, it's the reduction in the pollution level by injecting the urea to bring the nitrous oxides down.
Okay.
And so that goes in, as I said, turns it into nitrogen, goes to the catalyst, that turns it into ammonia, hits the catalyst, turns it into nitrogen and steam, and that's it.
Well, this is the kind of technology that I guess we needed to get diesels back into our hands. Now, does all of the diesel categories in every segment have this kind of?
Not everybody is running AdBlue. It all depends. For a vehicle like this, because it's heavier and it does higher load work,
Okay.
under those conditions, it will be a little bit more polluting. So it will need it to be able to get under the level, and they bring it well under the level. So
So not every diesel that you buy today in the market will have
no,
this kind
but
of system.
increasingly that will be the answer.
This will be the answer to it.
Yeah.
Okay. Now the other thing I had to ask you about this, and I know that it adds cost.
Right.
All right. So the typical oil change, I mean, we've seen places go for $20 to $35, maybe $40 for a full service oil change. This would add another $10, $15, $20 to it maybe. So an oil change you're looking at is a $50 oil change?
Closer to $30, depending on how large the tank is and how much the dealer's going to charge you for the urea.
But does Volkswagen in this particular case have kind of special deal on
Yeah,
service?
I mean, Volkswagen went to the point where to get their sales up and get people to want their cars, for the first 3 years, your service is free.
Okay.
So that's taken care of.
So folks, if you're buying that car and your first couple years you won't have to be taking care of it, it comes with
And that's pretty true for all the premium brands, which is where you're going to find the diesel technology.
But
right
you
now.
told us that you're going to have to kind of hang on to the diesel longer to get a payback on all
Right.
this extra technology.
Right.
So if you're leasing your car,
Doesn't make sense.
You're not going to make the.
If you're the second owner, hey, you're all right because the depreciation's gone.
So there you go.
You're cool.
Buy it
And
coming off lease.
it's also why diesels come back to the dealer. They can be 8 years old, and you're as long as they're well maintained. A lot of these dealers are giving the person they're buying the used diesel vehicle from almost what they paid for it.
So it's good resale value.
Oh, absolutely a good resale
But
value.
yeah, that was the last point I wanted to really bring in here, folks. I know you probably heard that to maintain a diesel, they're more expensive to work on. Is that still true? I mean, there are more parts,
That's
right?
if you have to do work on it.
Okay, right.
That's the thing about it is they're stoutly built, and as long as you pay attention and put good fuel in it, just like a gasoline engine.
Yeah.
You change the fluids when you're supposed to. Do all the things you're supposed to do. This thing will do 200,000 miles easy.
So don't go to the Speedy Mart.
Right. Don't get your bulk oil changed. Don't do that garbage. Get the right stuff.
The no brand gasoline and no
exactly.
diesel fuel. Well, Chris, this is really an eye-opening experience. First of all, to tell us about the technology that's at play nowadays, what we can. I mean, we're not really being the enemy of the environment anymore.
No, not at all.
So a diesel makes sense for people that have that service need to tow, to haul, to get great fuel economy, pulling, doing hard work, and yet in a vehicle like this, does it still make sense for a small car?
Oh yeah, absolutely. The Cruise Diesel, rumors are 55 miles a gallon. Mazda's about to introduce the SkyActiv D, as they call it, their new 2.2 liter turbo diesel. That's going to go in their little CX-5 utility. Wow. It may go in other cars, and fuel economy again is going to be quite high. People are going to be amazed, and this is unlike a hybrid or an EV. You don't plug it in and have to wait. Oh, geez, when am I won't be able to make that appointment. No, you just go in, you fill it up, boom, you're on your way. The way you've been driving all these years,
nothing changes.
Here. Nothing.
No. So folks, that's the best advice we can give you. These are new technologies really for diesel cleanliness. A little bit more cost up front, big payback if you need that in your lifestyle. Chris, it's again great information. I expect you're going to have a full review of the car on thevirtualdriver.com.
Yeah, I just have to figure out where I can drive and get some of that fuel out of this thing.
well, hey, why don't we help you out? You can take me for a little ride in this thing.
Okay.
And you know, give us a spin on the thing at the end of our show. We wanted to basically thank you guys for tuning in because, you know, you've got to walk away with great information from In a Heartbeat. It's all about making a better life for yourself. Sometimes diesels will make sense for you, and if they don't, you have all kinds of other choices. It's always better to be the best informed audience that you can possibly be. And I think today, Chris, with your help, I think we got there. You know, the Europeans have been jumping on this bandwagon for a long time. Maybe it's time for us to start considering diesel technology.
Absolutely. And given the range we got, we can go to Chicago and back and not even have to fill up.
I think you're buying lunch then.
Okay.
Okay, folks, again, thanks a lot for joining us on here In a Heartbeat. You know what? Let's do this. Let's remember that when we say knowledge is power, we're going to hear a lot more good stuff about finding out about your transportation needs from our buddy Chris Sawyer of the future. Chris, let's go for a little ride here.
That's it.
All right, let's just shut this baby up.
Let's close this first.
A little hook there.
Oh, you bad boy.
Okay, there you go.
Oh, it worked.
All right, let's try it out. Now remember, no smoking tires. Nice and slow.
I could.
Okay, all the way to Chicago. Seat belts, please.
Yes, sir.
Buckle up for safety. I didn't even hear it start, Chris.
Isn't that amazing?
Wow, is it quiet?
I've averaged 31 miles an hour.
Is this thing quiet? It's like no diesel I've ever heard.